Hello, World Civ 107. Welcome to week 8. And I put out this announcement a little bit later because I know most of you aren't even having really time to watch the announcements right away, anyhow. But I felt that this was a very, very important week to cover, to put in context to the current politics going on right now in the United States. And I don't like shoving my own political point of views down my students' throats. So I don't want it to come off this way. What I want to do is, because I'm watching a lot of what I consider false information or false analogies being put on the mainstream media in regards to Bernie Sanders being called a democratic socialist, and the way that there's an attempt to link him and his vision with the Russian Revolution. There's so many things to say about all of that, and what I'm hoping to do is not necessarily persuade you to vote for a particular person, but to just realize where history, the discussion of history and of people is being manipulated. Okay? So, first of all, as you're noticing, this is one of the most significant revolutions in world history, next to the French Revolution. Okay? So, the French Revolution was huge, and the French Revolution was a massive influence, and some say very negative ways as well, on the Russian Revolution. But as you'll notice in the videos, before Stalin took power and the gulags and all of the terrible things that we have learned about the Soviet Union occurred, the Western powers, including the United States, was willing to invade Russia, a newly formed Soviet government, right after World War One. I mean, in the middle of everybody being exhausted of war, they continued the war, and this is not talked about much, and I think for a reason. But instead of trying to make go into an analysis of why that is, I just want to point out a few other things. You will also notice that in my lecture this week, I don't have you watch all of the videos talking about Soviet atrocities and the terribleness of Lenin and Stalin. We'll learn more about Stalin later. But what I've noticed in our media is that they always focus on those things, and so people don't have an understanding about why. Like, people saw get exposed to the negative results of some of the things that came out of the Soviet Union without understanding the context that got us to where we're at in the first place. And the context is important to many of us. And this is what I mean. We're going to see later on in this class, as we go over different parts of the world, that almost every nation that embraced communism was not a free society before they were communist. They were in societies that had torture and a big police apparatus that oppressed people. Often it was the democratic West. It was France and Britain colonizing, for example. Or we learned about Belgium. When Leopold II killed all those people from the Congo, that's usually not called a crime of capitalism. But wasn't that what it really was? It was to generate money for profit and destroying people to do it that way, right? Now, that doesn't all of a sudden make atrocities from another political perspective okay. As my mom used to say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. But we're not having an honest discussion about the background of most countries that went communist. Russia had the czars. We all learned about Ivan the Terrible We know about there's the background of Russia, and then there was the terrible bloody World War One, and then that's from what the context in which Russia becomes communist. You're going to see something very similar with China later on, and you're going to see the similar things in Latin America. So let's just briefly I will try to be really quick about this. These terms, social democracy and democratic socialists, were both, and there's two different terms that are used in Europe now, were originally Marxist, and many would have been Leninists, following the Russian model. So that's true. But if you look in Germany in particular, in the 50s, the Social Democrats abandoned revolutionary politics and being Marxists and basically joined in creating programs for kind of balancing out the excesses of capitalism. And they were using their ideas to seduce people away from supporting the Russian political idea of socialism. And we'll learn more about that when we talk about World War II, and the Soviet Union actually goes all the way up into East Germany, and Stalin is one who defeats Hitler. Okay. So over the years, democratic socialists and social democrats have helped create in Europe what's called the welfare state. It's not like welfare in the United States. Now, I just lived for about almost 3 months in Europe, along with my travels to Asia last year, and I spent 2 months in the Netherlands. I saw for myself the welfare state. I saw very wealthy people. I didn't see a war on the rich, but I saw that the average working person had full medical coverage with almost no cost, much more affordable education, and many other programs that are available. And yes, people paid higher taxes, but I would argue that they also are living a much more quality life. No, I didn't see anybody with the stress that we have in the United States. And just to tell you, I had a discussion about Bernie Sanders. Well, here's what's funny. Just say, when I was going from Iceland into Denmark, and I was going to visit my friends in Denmark, Fox News just put out a video that a woman claimed that the falling apart of socialist Venezuela to be compared to Denmark, and that the system in Denmark was this terrible tragedy and disaster. It was literally almost all fake news and lies. And the Danish put out a video documenting and discussing this ridiculous fake news article by Fox News. This was the talk on my plane. I was overhearing from Iceland into Denmark, and then my friends in Denmark kept talking about this as well. They had a Bernie Sanders sticker on their bicycles. They've been to the United States to more places in the United States than I've been able to go to, and they've seen both systems. Bernie Sanders is not considered a radical. He's considered normal politics there. When I was in the Netherlands, I talked at a bar with this moderately conservative Dutch guy who basically pointed out that Bernie Sanders is considered a normal politician. His economic policies I'm talking about, not radical in Europe. No political party in Europe is against universal health care. Not any conservative is against that. That is not considered a left or right-wing issue. Germany has had universal health care since the 19th century. The 19th century. Okay? So, what we have going on here is in a bubble. Now, Bernie Sanders' positions on Fidel Castro and the achievements of writing. I just want to point out one thing. Before Fidel Castro was in power in Cuba, there was a dictator as well. When he was supporting the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, Reagan was illegally selling weapons to Iran, the Iran-Contra. Just look up Iran-Contra. and there was a dictatorship there as well. At the time that he went to the Soviet Union, that was under perestroika and glasnost. That's when the Soviet Union was having a reform for free speech and changing their economics, and a lot of US politicians were having optimism about the changes of the Soviet Union. These are all things that were not discussed. I don't know if that really makes a difference in the minds of most people or not, but I'm just putting that into context. Ultimately, I just want to say that, again, if you look at the platform that you see of Bernie Sanders have, it would be considered the welfare state, and it would not be considered socialism, by the way. And this is where it gets tricky, how to take the significance of these words or not. The democratic socialists have been in power, by the way, in Spain for a lot as a dominant party. Spain doesn't have the best economy. It's not like Venezuela's economy. I just want us to think about things when it comes to about how we look at the world. When I was traveling in Asia, I went to countries that were ruined by communism and socialism, like in Cambodia. I was in Thailand, where it's supported by the U.S. government. A person was sent to prison for saying something critical of the king's dog. The military took power there, rigged the elections, and Prayut is now in power. And most people there know that that is essentially a dictatorship by any definition. And so what's interesting is what gets to be considered a dictatorship or not, or how to look at certain events. When I was in Hong Kong during the demonstrations, our president and our Congress took a stand on the side of, at least verbally, of the people of Hong Kong. But in the middle of that, in Chile, the government backed by the U.S. has I think probably killed more protesters than the police have in Hong Kong. And in the middle of the whole crisis that's happening in Venezuela and Bolivia is a whole other thing. Now look, maybe I've lost you on some of what I'm saying. The bottom line is I want you to be aware that our mainstream media has lost. It is not doing what it's supposed to do. You should be getting quality information about news with not a strong set of editorializing. And I think that most of us would agree with that. You don't need to be told to hate the president or to love the president, or to hate this candidate or to love this candidate. You should be having information putting out to you. You should be having a discussion of foreign policy, of why the U.S. government backs Saudi Arabia, for example, and then tells you that Iran is evil. What makes Saudi Arabia and Iran different? They both have religiously ran governments that are not free. So what's the difference? The difference isn't what you're being told. There is a difference, though, right? And we're, in a sense, just pawns of elites. This is why I value history so much and think that it's so important for us to have a quality education. And so, there's a myth that people getting educated are going to all of a sudden gravitate towards one political view by certain folks. That's not the case. But what I notice is that when I'm meeting people who get exposed to understanding the world, that even when we disagree, we have an equal understanding of what we're working with. Right now, I see things posted on Facebook and social media and the news, and I realize how lost we are. I can't even get to a real discussion with half the people to bring us to what's really at stake, because the information is so convoluted with garbage that we get nowhere, right? And people misunderstanding the points that I'm making because their mind has already gravitated towards seeing that saying this particular type of thing implies this kind of thing, right? So it's a crisis. And regardless of what happens, we shouldn't be so mad at each other. We should have an understanding of why we are all mad, why we're upset, why each side has doubled down so much to make a position of where they're at. And think about what is it about the system that got us to this point. it's the system itself, right? I mean, now it's voting time, so we're going to do our thing. And but in any case, I just wanted to give some food for thought on that mix with this week's topics. I'm going to be grading from home. Please feel free to contact me if you have questions, or you want to question me or debate with some of the things that I've said. You know, give me a phone call or whatever. I hope you're having a blessed week, and we'll be in touch.